Okay, my name is Ted Zavishlock. You've heard me a couple times over the course of this event here. I'm the statewide private land supervisor for Arkansas Game and Fish. And so this little session here is going to be a little bit different. We want this to be interactive. And first thing off the bat, you see these phone numbers on both screens. Be thinking about your questions. Text that number, your questions about and the topic of this is keeping prescribed fire as a resource management tool. So that can be anything about questions about PBAs, questions about challenges, just anything you would like to ask the panel that we have here. And I'll introduce them here in just a second, but just be thinking about your questions. Go ahead and text them in right now if you have some. So first off, I'd like to talk a little bit, just a few success stories here in Arkansas on private lands with prescribed fire. So starting around 2020, we started into the PBA system. Currently, before that, we had 0 PBAs, or prescribed burn associations in Arkansas. It was all around us. It was in Oklahoma. It was basically every state that touched us. We currently now have 4, basically almost fixing to be 5, because one is splitting off. We kind of a little lesson learned with that. We started with like 4 or 5 counties, and we kind of quickly learned it should be probably about 2 counties per PBA, or maybe 3. But you get 2 if it's too far for a burn trailer to be dragged around multiple counties, it kind of becomes kind of an issue. So the other big thing that we've kind of ramped up in the last couple of years is we have what's called Learn to Burn program for landowners. We have a Learn to Burn 1 and a Learn to Burn 2. And this is a education series. Learn to Burn 1 is like designed to be like an evening meal and kind of a 2-hour talk. And we cover topics like prescribed fire weather, ignition techniques, equipment, fire ecology, that kind of stuff. Mostly just enough to kind of whet a landowner's appetite and hopefully kind of get them excited about prescribed fire, make them aware of issues in prescribed fire, and hopefully they're at least a supporter of prescribed fire after they leave that. Then we have Learn to Burn 2, which is a hands-on class where it's generally on a Saturday or a weekend. It's probably from like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we actually break them up into small groups. They actually get together. We give them a few presentations, but mostly they work on a burn plan together. They go out and walk around the unit, and then them as a group go do a prescribed fire on that property. So it's a kind of a hands-on kind of deal, kind of similar to the PBA talk that you heard earlier. And then the last thing we kind of have had here in Arkansas since 2020 is we have a Quail Forever Hit Team, which is a 5-person team that kind of goes around the state. Well, goes around one corner of the state, mostly here where you're at now in the Ozarks, doing prescribed fire or implementing prescribed fire on the ground for landowners. So with that, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves. Let's start down here. And you can just briefly kind of introduce yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon. You have to ignore my accent. A lot of you guys from out west, but I'm Randy Brents. I'm the prescribed fire manager for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. I've been doing prescribed fire, wildfire for the last 15 and a half years.
My name's Maya Larson. I'm the National Fire Program Manager for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. And I've played a good part in doing prescribed burn associations here at Arkansas.
Wes McKinney, Fire Management Officer for the Arkansas Forestry Division. I took this role back in April. I've been in burning since '05 in the private sector. I worked for the feds, then came to the state side. So I know we got folks from Montana here. I spent a lot of time out in Montana, so it's some pretty country.
This one on. I'm Curtis Cecil. I'm a professor at a local community college. I'm also the president of the local PBA. I'm also on the National Bob White Technical Committee, and I'm a plant ecologist by training. I'm a student of prescribed burning. I'm not an expert. And we got our PBA going just last year. So I know a little bit about that. I guess that's why Ted invited me here today.
I'm Jim Whitaker. I'm a rice farmer in South Arkansas.
Okay, so there again, text your questions in right now. You kind of see the panel, kind of seeing their expertise. We have a few questions already that we're going to kind of go with. I'm going to start with one here. What is the greatest challenge starting a PBA? I'm going to start with you.
Okay. There are a couple challenges. Should I stand up?
No,
Okay.
y'all just sit down.
The getting equipment, that's not the biggest challenge because Game and Fish is so helpful and QF was so helpful in getting equipment. I think getting participation, getting the word out, getting participation, it's not hard to get people that are interested to sign up, but it's difficult to get them to show up because, you know, burning is controlled by the weather and it's hard for people with work to kind of be adaptable to the weather. You know that. So getting participation is difficult. I think there's a lot of interest in this part of the world because Game and Fish and the Arkansas Forestry Commission have been doing a lot of burning, and so it's pretty well received by the public. We don't have to overcome any negative perceptions here, I don't think. But getting landowners to get involved more, and we just got started, so I think we're gonna be able to work through that. But those are the things that I see.
All right, we got a first question in, I guess, from the audience here. It says, is there any interest in burning during growing season? So one of you two want to take that?
That's been a big push here lately with agencies in Arkansas and in other parts of the United States as well. Fire historically burned year round and primarily in the lightning season. So for Arkansas, that would be July, August, September, when we would have had frequent lightning strikes and fire burning unimpeded across the landscape. Of course, over time with settlement, fire being used more to track game for hunting, those type of things with Native Americans, European settlers, fire got lit more, you know, February, March timeframe, right before green up to track bison, those type of things. But generally, fire would have burned a lot throughout the year. And that's been what's missing on the landscape is fire in the growing season, because everybody gets so keyed in on that late spring, early growing season time frame, because it's cooler. Fires, I wouldn't say it's easier to control that time of year. The weather is just cooler. It's easier for people to get out there. It's hotter this time of year. So there has been a big push. We have to do a better job by educating people why we should be burning more in the growing season. Agencies are pushing. Our agency is taking about, we might have been doing 5 to 10% of our overall prescribed burning efforts in the growing season. Now we're up there to 30 to 50% of our burns are happening in that July through October timeframe. So we just got to keep doing it, keep getting the message out, keep getting it in the face of the public, let the public see the benefits of that, and then just keep the education side of it up. And I think we can shift a lot of that. The biggest benefit would be smoke management side of it. You know, instead of burning 300,000 acres in March in Arkansas, if we can spread that 300,000 acres out over the course of the entire year, the smoke management impact to the general public's a lot less as well. So there's a lot of benefit to doing that fire in the growing season and what it does in the natural plant communities. So we just have to get that message out and just keep educating people.
We got a specific message here from Mr. Whitaker, I guess, about talking about ag situations. What challenges do you see using fire with the residue management that you mentioned earlier in your talk?
So one of the biggest challenges is a public perception when they see smoke, and if you don't burn at the right times of the day. So we have a voluntary smoke management guidelines for Arkansas rice. And what we found is if we used best management practices where we conditioned our straw, we'll dry our straw out with different tools. We burn during 11 to 4 p.m. We watch the wind, we watch the direction, humidity, those type of things. We have a cleaner, better burn if we have the right type of weather. Just a couple of years ago, I was enjoying a football game at Jonesboro. Jonesboro, within 50 miles of Jonesboro in the northeast part of the state, we have 700,000 acres of rice. It is our largest rice growing region. And it was game day. I was up there to visit my son in college, and somebody right outside town lit a fire, and the whole stadium was engulfed in smoke. And, you know, farmers have to do a better job of that sort of thing. We've got to watch the public perception. My friends in California can no longer burn. Burning is pretty much, and rice straw is pretty much banned all over the world because of a social impact it has on communities. So what we try to tell people is don't burn beside the highway. A couple of years ago, I had flaggers on both ends of the highway. Smoke was going toward the highway, and a school bus pulled around. I mean, just never even stopped and just went straight into the smoke. That's the kind of risk you just can't overcome if something happens. So we have to be careful, but we've got a hotline now that we can call in. The bad news with the hotline is up until last year we had 4,000 acres called in, prescribed burns of 1.2 million acres. So farmers are not, you know, we're a little hard-headed group. We know what we're doing, we think, and that sort of thing, but the public perception, we've got to keep the public on our side.
We can lose that pool if not, like California.
Yeah, so when we look at, you know, this action reaction type thing, when I burn, I'm going to save 5 tillage trips, and I'm going to have a better seed bed for next year. So I'm going to have a better seed bed. I'm going to save 5 tillage trips. California uses tillage, and they use about 1 acre foot of water to put on those rice fields to decompose the straw during the winter. Guess what happened in California this year? They got their allocation water cut, and they went from 500,000 acres to 200,000 acres of rice in 1 year. You have to think about the environmental impacts of what you're doing. So it's not always going to be abundance of water, things like that.
All right, Maya, this is a question for you. It says, what is the typical membership dues for PBAs in Arkansas? Kind of maybe just talk about, you know, memberships in general for PBAs.
Yeah, so most of the PBAs, I think all the PBAs we have in Arkansas right now are charging $25 a year, which that's pretty much just to cover the costs of maintaining the trailers. So, you know, getting a spare tire every now and again, and just, you know, keeping the equipment up to specs, and the occasional meals for meetings and stuff like that. So that's, you know, we try to keep those prices fairly low. And I don't think any PBAs that I'm working with have any interest in making those dues any higher, because there's really not a whole lot of cost to a PBA besides just maintaining a trailer.
Right. Okay.
Can I add?
Yeah. go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that for our PBA, we were $25 a year the first year, and then we realized we have a lot of people that want to participate that are not landowners and will never have property to burn. And so for non-landowners, ours is $10, and for landowners who plan to burn at some time in the future is $25.
Okay. That's a good, yeah, it's a good way of getting extra volunteers. Okay. Well, we got the question a lot of landowners ask. A lot of landowners, you know, here in Arkansas and other parts of the country, they want to know about liability. Okay. Landowners in other parts of the state and the country, they all talk about liability. They want to know about liability. And also it says burn boss requirements. So I'm going to let you handle that one.
All right, how we're taught in this state of Arkansas is liability is you strike the match, you're liable for what you're burning. But with these learn to burn that the Game and Fish is teaching, you know, the public landowners is writing a good burn plan. So if you stay within your prescription of what you're doing, it's less likely you're going to lose a burn. But where it gets negligent is where you go outside those parameters and you lose a burn a house down or something further down the road there. So that's something to think about is when you're burning is when you're doing your parameters, make them measurable. Don't make, you know, don't paint a window to where you're skirting the edge, because usually what happens is that RH does fall below that and something bad does happen. But as far as liability, you know, you control the fire and you also control where the smoke goes. He's right down there for farmers. You know, we have so much ag burning in this state, and the smoke can be a nuisance and it can cause an accident. You know, you go back to the Florida incident years ago where they had smoke, super fog that landed on the interstate and caused a big pileup. Going through I-40 here, you know, I think of all the farms in eastern Arkansas. I mean, that's really feasible. I mean, it can happen. So something cool that's really come out and we're in the test phase is this Fire Smart app that we're creating to give to public landowners and other agencies to where they can plug their parameters in on an app, and it's going to tell them where their smoke's going, and it's going to tell them what they're affecting, if it's a city, a hospital, an interstate. So that's something that we've created, and I think this month it's going to get launched out to the public. So we did the test phase in September, and so I've been using it on prescribed burns throughout the state, just testing it. So this is something that's really proactive. I don't know if a lot of states carry that, but I'm really glad to see that a lot of agencies and private landowners and farmers came together for this app to really help us out with smoke management. Because to me, that's one of the biggest things is smoke management. Where are you dumping your smoke and what is it affecting?
Randy, this would be a question for you and I don't know if they're really talking about historical or now time, but you can address both. This is, do you have a statewide burn frequency similar to Kansas and Oklahoma here in Arkansas? So maybe historically, did we have the same historical burn frequency as those two states, Kansas and Oklahoma?
Okay, so historically, Arkansas being part of the Southeast, we burn at a higher return interval than most of the United States. If you look at any of the fire scar records that they've went and, you know, cut down trees and looked at tree rings, fire scar analysis in the tree rings, looked at fire return intervals, look at some of the climate data they pulled and recreated that fire return interval nationally. The Southeast burned more frequently than anywhere else in the United States, except for some like really remote parts of California where the frequency might have been a little bit higher in some different terrain. But overall, you know, Arkansas burned on depending on where you're at, Ozarks, Ouachita's, back down where Grand Prairie used to be, you know, sometimes an annual return interval in some of those ecosystems, but typically on a 2 to 5 year rotation, fire burned through the Ozarks. Fire would have burned unimpeded until something on the landscape stopped it. You know, I got off on the north face of the slope at night and hit a drainage. Humidity came up that night, put it out, may rekindle the next day, moved around until a light rain happened or something. But historically, fire moved across the landscape at a pretty high interval, even a little bit some more, according to the historical records, a little bit more than frequently than it did out in Oklahoma and Kansas. I think some of that is due to a lot of site factors, site index of the soils, how fast plants grow. I mean, Arkansas gets a lot of rain a year, but we still have a lot of western fauna and flora that would have been fire dependent. So fire would have been, you know, burning frequently across the landscape, where you get in some places that got a little bit poorer soils. It takes longer for those fuels to rebound to be able to carry fire again in some of those other states. So it just kind of depends on where you would, but yeah, I mean, it would have been pretty close to the same fire return intervals historically. The big message is that we are lacking fire on the landscape. We have to get more fire back on the landscape for our native plant communities and our native animal communities, because it's nowhere near what it used to be historically.
Just a quick add. I think it's really interesting that you can overlay like a lightning flash density map with a historic fire frequency map, and they overlay each other almost perfectly. So,
okay, Maya, this will be for you. How late in the year can you burn to avoid overwinter impacts to streams? So I guess they're saying they're talking about dormant season burning. How late in the year, or is there any concern with impacts to streams? I guess they're talking about erosion, that kind of stuff. So yeah, right.
Okay, I think she's wanting me to take it. So
Okay. I'm just trying to spread them around.
Wes could speak on this too, because he's been out west fighting fire in California. I've been all over out west. Big concern out west with soil erosion, soil stability. You don't see that as much here due to our topography and our soils. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. If you burned on a really steep slope next to a stream and you scorched it, and sterilized the soil, took all the canopy off the trees, created crown fires where that soil's unprotected, you're going to get some erosion. Here, the probably biggest erosion factor we would have would be from our fire line installation. If you're using dozers, not putting water bars in, not putting your turnouts in, that type of thing to, turn that water off of that stuff and not be carrying that sediment down those fire lines into the streams. That would probably be our biggest issue concerning prescribed fire, is the actions you take getting the line in to burn it. Not necessarily, usually our fires are so, with the prescribed fire, controlling the fire behavior, we're not burning that thing down to just bare mineral soil. So we don't really have that impact with sedimentation, getting the stream channels, those type of things.
I got another question here. I guess this would be for Curtis. So, most of the landowners that we deal with that are in these PBAs, a lot of times, these groups, they form, because they need to get fire on the landscape. How does a PBA, continue to recruit members? And, if landowners get unwilling or, physically unwilling to be able to continue burning, how do you keep that going with a group, so to speak?
Well, you tell me, Ted. No, yeah, so we've
Is
only,
it a challenge, I guess?
Yeah. We've only been around for a year and a half, so that's what we're working on. Getting the word out is just basic networking, and social media, I think, is pretty important, and that's something that we really haven't got going big on. But I think you probably need to have a person start a Facebook page just for the PBA. And we have people from different organizations like the Land Conservancy and the QF and the Beaver Water District and some of these local ecological organizations. They put our stuff on their Facebooks, but I think, what we probably are going to do is start our own. I just haven't gotten around to it myself because I'm busy with other stuff, but I think the social media is pretty important in tapping into the landowner organizations, and actually working with the private lands biologist, who can identify the landowners that are really wanting to burn, because a lot of landowners, they want their land burned, but they'd rather just have somebody else do it. But
Right.
I think our private lands biologist can tell us who to recruit that actually wants to participate in that themselves.
Right. I think you're kind of doing that with reducing that fee to $10, trying to get people out there who just want experience on prescribed fire, don't necessarily have the land. Another thing, one of the PBAs attempted is they went to like the local, if there's a university and you're close to you that has a wildlife program, go to that professor and say, hey, these are wildlife students. They need experience on prescribed fire. They don't own land most of the time, but plug them in these PBAs and let them get experience. So.
Yeah, and if you've got organizations in your area, like the Northwest Arkansas has a pretty vibrant retiree community of volunteers, and a strong master naturalist program. So a lot of our core volunteers are master naturalists. So if you got organizations like that,
Right.
getting them involved is pretty helpful.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I would also say from a national perspective, if you look at states like Nebraska, who have really successful PBAs, I think a lot of it is that the landowners kind of hold a lot more power in those states than they do down here in the Southeast. Like in Nebraska, their prescribed fire council is completely landowner run. So I think just encouraging landowners to be involved in those things, rather than leaving it just to agencies, is really important.
Oh, if I could add one more thing,
Okay.
Tim.
One more.
I'm a professor.
Yeah.
I'm used to talking in 45-minute blocks.
Okay.
No, Northwest Arkansas, a lot of the property, to me, I come from Illinois, and my family has a farm in Illinois, and the landowners and I'm sure productive lands everywhere, the landowners have a little more stake in what happens on the land, and I don't know, they seem to work better. Farmers seem to work better helping farmers. A lot of the property owners in this part of the world are recreational property landowners, and there's a lot of deer hunting clubs and things like that. I don't think they work together as well as farmers do. So that's something I'm just trying to figure out myself here.
Right.
No, you're absolutely right, because I think that that's one of the major reasons Nebraska and a lot of those Midwest Great Plains states are really successful, is because that they have a monetary value to, a lot of them are ranchers. Like, they have a monetary reason to be putting fire on the ground. And a lot of the stuff down here is like, it's a wildlife reason a lot of times.
Right.
So
Okay, great questions. Keep texting them in if you hadn't done one. This next one is for Jim. It says, how did Rice go about establishing and adopting the voluntary smoke management guidelines?
So what we did was our Arkansas Rice Federation picked a task force. We had someone write a letter to the editor in Jonesboro and kind of stir up the local community about smoke. So we knew that we needed to do something about it. We recognized there was a problem. We formed a task force. I don't know, it was like 8 or 10 volunteers. And then we started defining what, best management practice would be, how we're going to do it. We, trying to work on the fire app and, things like that, trying to work with the forestry department too, because that's who we call into. And so just basically is recognize there's a problem from leadership and appointing a subcommittee to start working on it.
All right, thank you. This is for Randy. Can you talk about the burn culture in Arkansas? And if so, what work has been done to improve burn culture in Arkansas?
I think generally most people like to burn stuff. And historically, people did like to burn stuff. When Europeans settled here, they brought fire with them, right? They brought fire with them to clean their property off, for their forestation efforts, for clearing their land to plant. They brought fire with them. You hear the stories about people, around here filling a tire full of diesel and lighting it on fire and rolling it off the hill to burn their property, or dragging a four-wheeler, tire around behind a four-wheeler to burn it. So people historically have burned. The issue's been really, I think, over time, just with population centers growing out, landowners becoming smaller, 40-acre farms, down 20-acre, down 10-acre landowners, that type of thing. A need, kind of like they hit on earlier, some of these lands shifting from, homesteaders living out on the landscape, living out there, raising their animals there. Over time, that shifted to people working in cities. Those properties becoming recreational. And so the biggest thing is using things like these PDAs to train people, private landowners get fire back on the landscape, because over time we're losing that. It's not that we didn't, people didn't like doing it historically. People, it's always been that way. The South's burned through lightning strikes or through Native American set or through Europeans moving here. Fire's carried on the landscape all these years. Our plant communities tell us that they're dependent on fire. So the big issue is, getting the landowners educated, getting them trained, getting the PBA started, getting more fire back on landscape, because we can burn all we want on game and fish land. That little less than 400,000 acres, it's a very, very small portion of what's in Arkansas. The Forest Service can burn all they want. 3 million acres, still a very small portion of the acres in the state. Forestry Division can help landowners burn, but overall, still, again, in the big context of things, that's a small portion. Quail Forever can help. I mean, as agencies, we can get fire out there and get it in people's face. The biggest tool is going to be the education side of it, and get people to pick up that torch on their own and go burn their own land and incorporate their neighbors and train their neighbors and educate their neighbors. So their neighbor can go do that. They can take their kids out there and teach their kids how to do that type of thing. That's what's going to have to happen to get fire out of the landscape more than what it is now.
Yes, this be for Wes. It says, can you talk about the typical number of prescribed burns logged in each year in Arkansas and the effects that has on wildfires in Arkansas?
So we know the number one cause is human cause for wildfires. So, and that can go from escape control burn to burning trash. But the numbers that we have, this year we burnt about 329,000 that we recorded out of our dispatch. Last year was 320,000. So we're seeing an uptick of acreage getting burnt, which is a positive thing. And the biggest increase was on the private side. So that's telling us that the private sector is getting out there and we're burning more. So that's good. As Randy said, it's not just one agency trying to burn. It's a collaboration of everybody, including public landowners, industrial, state, local, federal, government entities that are burning. So, the state, our challenge is we get a lot of burns that we do, but we're also tasked with responding to wildfires. So when we, kind of our protocol, when we go to fires and it's an escape control burn, yeah, we'll look at the parameters, burn plan and all that, but sometimes it just happens, right? And we don't try to go there and say, hey, you've done wrong. We try to educate. And I think with this learn to burn that the Game and Fish has done has really helped everybody across the board, because we've got numerous calls where we can come out, hey, can you come out? We're going to burn today. Just kind of help us guide. We know the Game and Fish is busy, and usually we're sitting there for initial attack, ready to respond, but we'll go out and help them get started that morning. If they have any questions or, get that burn safe before we get called somewhere else. So there's different challenges, for each agency. We assist U.S. Forest Service a lot. We've got what we call, this is the cross boundaries. It used to be called Stevens. So within 10 miles of U.S. Forest Service, private landowners can put in for that and get their burns done for free. And it's our agency that comes out and burns that. Right now, we're sitting at about 10,000 acres that we got allotted that we can burn in the next couple of years. So we're really going to start promoting that, getting caught up on our acreage. As we all know, 2020 was a rough year for everybody, and that really put us behind even on burning, because we could not interact with Forest Service. We couldn't interact with Game and Fish to get these burns and partnerships. So with more controlled burns, yes, we will see more uptick of wildfires, but that's wildfires or prescribed burns, a small amount of what we go and fight. Usually it's somebody that's, arson or out there setting stuff. But so don't let that deflect of what you're doing as far as burning private landowners. Keep doing what you're doing and reach out to your state agencies or your partners to come out and educate more. I don't know how it works. I know we got Montana, Wyoming here. I don't know how that all works with your state and local government, but be proactive, get out there. You never know until you ask.
This is a question for Jim. How would you recommend to increase participation in reporting tools, and how could that help the conservation, or how can the conservation community help with that? You know what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure about how to increase participation. It's pretty easy right now. So one of the things, we've got a hotline. The app will probably be a little easier, but participation is just, I hate to say that it's going to probably end up one day being mandatory, but that's eventually the direction we're going if we don't do a better job with our fire control.
Let's see, this will be from Maya here. Do PBAs require landowners to burn on other people's properties before they get one done on their own? And who helps them write burn plans for PBAs?
So I've seen that rule be in a lot of bylaws for PBAs. I think the PBA that I started, we actually do not have that rule. I don't really see how it helps that much, especially getting started to, like people are trying to figure out where they are. We're trying to get lists of what needs to get burned that year and trying to figure out who that like core group of the PBA is. And so I haven't used that rule, but I've definitely seen it be in a lot of other folks' bylaws for PBAs. And then what was the second part?
Who helps write burn plans?
Okay, so each one of our
Burn plans.
PBAs has a agency advisors, and we do not write the burn plans for them. They write their own burn plans, and I will review them for them and look at them and make sure there's nothing crazy in there. But most of my PBAs will write their own burn plans. The landowner, the burn boss, will write their own plans.
Okay. This be for Randy. How do you maximize burn days in the year when there is typically, here in Arkansas, there can be fewer days of what generally most people think is the prescribed burn window. So you kind of address that with your very first question, but
Yeah, so maximize burn days. Get up every morning as soon as you got out of bed, check the fire weather. And I'm serious. There's those days come and go so fast. And if you're not on top of it daily, you're going to miss them. One of our burn bosses was with me a couple of weeks ago, and he told somebody, he said, the really good burn bosses in our agency, when we wake up in the morning before I get out of bed, I roll over, I pick my cell phone up at 5:30 in the morning. I tap on my fire weather icon on my cell phone and look at the fire weather even before I crawl out of bed in the morning. That way, when I know when my feet hit the ground, am I putting on my burn gear or am I putting on my jeans that morning? You have to have that mentality that every day is a burn day. There used to be a big school down in Florida, prescribed fire school down there, and that's their motto, is every day is a burn day. And all that means is that you get up every day and you're looking at the weather. Typically I tell people, you drive down the road and you start seeing dust behind your truck, it's probably a burn day. You need to be thinking about, do I have a unit that would burn today? As a landowner or private individual, it's just going to be checking that weather every day and then learning to think outside the box too and look at what there's doing. I can think of days that when you look at the fire weather, it shows rain that day. But if you go to the hourly forecast between 11 and 1 o'clock, you've got 2 hours of burning there before that rain hits at 1:30 or 2. So do I have a burn unit that will fit in that 2-hour window that morning? Those type of things. My grass units will burn right after a rain quicker than my wood units. You have to know everything that you're looking at burning and have it planned out and every possible weather parameter in your mind of what those units, how they'll burn. And some of that's going to come with experience and over time, just being out there. For example, in Arkansas in the growing season, I can burn grass at 60 to 65% humidity. Grass will start carrying fire. In March, it will not happen, but in September it will. So you have to think about those things, your fuel types, your seasonality, how those all interact. But the best thing I can tell anybody is if you're burning a lot, when you get up in the morning, to pull your fire weather up and look at it and think, is there anything that I have today that will burn under these conditions?
okay. This would be next one's for Wes there. Can you expand on the Stevens Amendment, kind of what that is? What does it do for landowners?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year we get funded about 4,800 and some change in acres from the federal government. And it's for us to do fuel reduction burns 10 miles and below from the U.S. Forest Service property. So we have, you know, when the Forest Service goes out and burns, they have a lot of private stuff in there, and we'll sign stuff, you know, to get it under Stevens. But we also go outside of that 10 miles and we'll do some burning for those private landowners that come to us. But it's got to be within 10 miles of the U.S. Forest Service property before we can, you know, even look at it. And there's no fudging it as far as 11 miles. So it's got to be 10 miles and below. But right now we're still in 2020. So we've got about 900 acres in there. And then I've got 4,000 plus and 21 and 22. And so we've got plenty of acres. So if that's something you're interested, pass it along and we'll get our rangers out there to sign y'all up.
Okay. This, I guess, take this. Last night, you know, Dr. Ford mentioned new technologies. What new technologies are on the landscape or in the future for prescribed fire?
Well, I think there's a lot. There's a lot of online modeling type things like Wes was talking about with the Fire Smart. I think it would be really cool to see stuff like that in other states. There's also, as far as like on the ground technologies, you know, we've got drones now that can drop little ping pong balls of fire, which Randy's got one of those, so he could tell you all about that. I don't really know that much about him, except that I've watched Randy fly the drone around and drop fire out of it. So, but you know, and we're always learning new stuff too. I think a lot of the growing season stuff, like I think the fire community is every year we learn something new, and we come up with new ideas and different stuff to try, and I think we'll only get better at it. You want to talk about the drone? No. So they all looked really interested in a fire drop-in drone.
So the new equipment. So yeah, there is, you know, we have the ability now of drones to drop little spheres. They're full of potassium permanganate, and they get injected with glycol, and it causes a reaction. So it takes about 30 seconds, causes extreme heat, and the ball actually melts and catches fire. Is how they ignite. But so they can be flown on a grid through a tablet, through an app, to ignite these prescribed burns, which it makes it safer, right? Our folks don't have to go out in the middle of burn units. It's hot outside. They're not hiking up and down the, you know, the mountains. They don't get trapped out there. All those things takes that out of it. So that helps us get more acres burned in a day. It helps us burn more burn units in a day. Helps us throughout the year get more done. But other equipment too. I mean, they're coming out with all kinds of slip-in units for the back of UTVs, you know, 50-gallon pump units that can draft water, that can spray water just as far as some of the fire engines can. You got slip-in units for back of trucks, you know, new things coming out for four-wheelers. There's another company now that's came out with electronic ATV torch that, you know, you hit a button and it throws an arc and shoots fuel across it and starts fire. So there's all this new stuff just constantly coming out. Some of it has to be field tested for a few years before we can start using it. But yeah, you just gotta keep your eyes up for that stuff, because it all is making our job easier, and it's making us more efficient too, as well. So we're getting more done in a day.
There's nothing wrong with a drip torch in your boots either, though. Just saying.
Okay. There's a question that says, does Arkansas have a prescribed fire council? And I guess maybe to add on that, what is the role of a prescribed fire council? Who wants to take that? You're on that? Okay.
Yeah, in Arkansas, we do have a prescribed burn council. It's been around for a while now. And actually, each year we host a prescribed burn boss course at Camp Robinson. It's a week-long course. We teach the students about weather and writing burn plans. Then we actually get out in the field and set fire. So we'll have 2 days of burning out there, and then they'll come back and look at their sites and do post-burn analysis and stuff. So it's a great course. This year we expanded it to 60, I believe. So that was the largest course that we put on, and we actually had some PBA members, that was in there. So we're expanding that to everybody. And so that's just showing the partnership, you know, and there's many partners: Fish and Wildlife, TNC, Forestry, Game and Fish, Quail Forever. I mean, there's a lot of agencies that's there, but it's a really good course. So we got the National Weather Service that comes in, teaches us weather. And, you know, we're giving them the tools, but then, you know, what comes with that is experience down the road in there. And that's where, you know, the experienced folks like us up here and y'all out there that's been around for a while that get out there and grab these newer folks and teach them the right way to burn, because that's going to be our future as we keep going. So if we're not teaching now, you know, we're going to get even further behind the curve. But I think right now in Arkansas, we're getting ahead of that curve and burning a lot more. And I hope we keep sending that trend from 23, 24 on.
Okay. I got a message here from Burner Bob. He wants to know about bobwhite quail management. Anything specific you would do differently doing prescribed fire for bobwhite quail management? Who wants to take that?
I feel like I should.
Okay. Burner Bob wants to know.
Yeah, so for quail management, I mean, quail is the firebird. So really any fire is good fire. I think we need a lot more fire on the landscape regardless. Like we need to be putting as much fire down as we possibly can. But I think these growing season burns are going to be really important for quail management and reducing a lot of the, you know, in Arkansas, sweet gums are a huge problem, cedars. You know, we can see a lot of success in killing those things if we use the right burn windows to do it. So I think killing sweet gums might be one of the best things we can do right now and killing cedars. So I don't know.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add? You probably do.
So just talking about quail or small game bird management in general,
Yeah.
game birds that rely on fire, even non-game birds, your species that are nesting in these grasslands and these shrublands. Fire is very important in their life cycle. They have to have that disturbance to maintain their habitat. They have to have that nesting habitat, that brood rearing habitat. They have to have all that mixed in a matrix just right there where they can hide from predators, where they can raise their young, all those things. In relation to fire, you know, seasonality is going to entice different responses on the landscape. So it's going to entice your forbs that are going to put, they're going to be better brood rearing cover maybe in the spring. Going to bring in more insects. Your grass is going to be better for your nesting. So you have to have that frequency disturbance, and it has to be at the right scale as well. It can't be 5,000 acres burned in one whack in this one spot, right? Because if that covey of birds is living here and you burn everything in 5,000 acres around, well, now they got to go find a new place to live, right? But if they've got burn at the appropriate size and scale around in their habitat, and they can use that. So there's a lot to think about. There's not really one answer.
Right.
With fire, it's scale, it's seasonality, it's, you know, what are you trying to get out of it? You're trying to get brood rearing habitat, are you trying to get nesting habitat? All those things is a part of the puzzle. Fire is just one of the tools in that toolbox to get that done. So we have to think about that. Not only how it relates to bobwhite quail even, but, you know, what's it doing to turkey poults? What's it doing for our songbirds out there that rely on those landscapes? What's it doing for our pollinators? Our pollinators that rely on our forbs. So all those things. And then how that relates, you know, up and down through the food chain.
Okay. Wes, I'll let you kind of address this. It says why fire for habitat management. So, I mean, we obviously know we can do it for forestry reasons, just kind of in general.
Well, fire has always been around. So you go back to the history of cleaning it up. And then we got to where we didn't put fire on the landscape. And now we're getting invasive species that's coming in, choking out our native stuff. So fire is a healthy way to manage the invasive species and to get back to our native species to where, you know, I think of turkey. I'm not a biologist, but reading researches here that, you know, a lot of people have a problem with burning during turkey season or before. So to me, burning before is you're opening that landscape for that turkey, right? So it's easier for them to go out and get the food that they need, and it makes it easier for them. And so those birds are going to keep sticking around. Yes, we might take a nest out here or there burning, but the long-term positive things of that is that bird thriving there on that property. We've done some burns up in Sagahatchee, just north of Morrilton, and the turkey that we've seen in there have come back quite a bit, and we've just treated 300 acres that was in there. But going up in there, and we're getting ready to burn it this spring, this year, or this next upcoming year. And so it's crazy how much we're seeing the return up there, and we've broken it up in different sections. Like Randy said, you can't go in and just wipe out, 300 acres. You've got to be able to manage pieces of that and keep putting fire in there and keep treating it other ways to get those invasive species and get your native grasses and forbs, because all that is intertwined with everything that thrives in wildlife. And if we keep letting these, non-native stuff coming in, it's starting to choke out some of our forests. Privet's a real bad thing that we deal with. I know we've got a piece on the Heritage Commission in Faulkner County that we're putting fire in, and now we're treating it chemically. And so we're having good success with that, with the privet. So it's things that we're still testing. And I know the Forest Service has a lot of stuff that they tested in the Southeast, and we keep relying on that information and keep testing it to see what works here for in Arkansas.
All right, looks like we got one last question, then we're going to wrap this up.
We got one more coming, 8 minutes.
Okay, let me read this here. Okay, that's a good question. Let's do Maya on this one. How do you measure success post-burn? How do you measure success post-burn? Yes.
So there is a lot of post-burn monitoring techniques that I have not done a whole lot of. So I don't have a great answer for that. One of these guys might have done more of it. But looking at things like scorch severity and how much of the fuel is consumed, and just a general coverage of the unit. And then I think a lot of times they'll come back and do plant surveys the following summer as well. Like I said, I haven't done a whole lot of that, but I've worked some with folks whose sole job is post-burn monitoring and evaluating. But I don't know a whole lot about it because I've never done it a whole lot.
Got one last question here
So,
for
okay,
Curtis.
I want to say
Oh,
something
okay.
real quick.
All right.
You're, as a landowner, as a private individual, as an agency person, your success or failure is measured by your objectives in your burn plan, right? If you put in, whatever you put what your objectives are in your burn plan, they need to be measurable. So you don't have to be some monitoring guru to, is my burn good or not? Look at your objectives in your burn plan and then ask yourself, did I accomplish those or not?
Okay, one last question here for Curtis. So kind of wrap up the PBAs. What kind of training do you feel like as a PBA member that you feel like you need or new members would need, I guess, to make them feel more comfortable?
Well, I think the Learn to Burns that Game and Fish is putting on are perfect. The Learn to Burn 1 is the half-day classroom. That's good. The Learn to Burn 2, actually the second class going out and actually conducting a burn with Game and Fish leading it is great. And then the Prescribed Fire Council, the burn school is a great way to build expertise in your PBA. And so that's what the first money that we spent as a PBA, besides drinks and snacks, was we just sent one of our members. Well, he got a scholarship to go to the 1 week burn training, and the PBA is paying the other half of the tuition. I think the total was $400 for a week of training. And so we sent him there. He just finished it last week. He just sent me pictures. And so I think you need a core of people that are more experts than the other people that just show up to help now and again is one thing, but I think the 1 week training for certain people is also needed, because you need a core of experts. We're blessed that we do have some professional burn people and a retired US Forest Service forester who's got 35 years of it. So we're lucky, but I think a few of the people need a little more training
Right.
than the learn to burns, and you'll be good.
Okay, let's wrap this up. I'll start here with Jim with final comments. You want to make any final comments? Just to kind of wrap us up about smoke, about, I guess, agricultural issues.
Well, I just think we just need to do the right thing and be good stewards of what we've been given and try to consider our neighbors when we move forward with fires.
From the PBA.
Me
side?
again?
Yeah,
Okay.
you again, wrap it up.
I think there was one thing that I would add on a question earlier about why use prescribed fire. I don't think I remember anyone mentioning cost. I think, you know, cost of managing large areas of land, prescribed burning is another good reason. And that's the natural way to manage the ecosystems too.
Okay.
I think in closing, you know, private landowners, other agencies, get together with, you know, state agencies or whoever your partners are on your property and build that relationship, because it's one I can see here in Arkansas that has really grown. And I wish other states were like that. I know other states have challenges, you know, and reach back out to us so we can help. And, you know, stop by one of our offices and ask those questions so we can answer them. We're here to help y'all. We're here to serve the people in Arkansas. So, you know, we can't forget that. And, you know, one other thing on the Stevens, you know, that I left out is, you know, if you do want that service, you know, we'll put in the fire breaks, all that, water bars, we'll manage that property just like it's our own, but it costs you nothing in there. So just keep that in mind when we move forward. And if you ever need anything, please reach out to, you know, our agency, Game and Fish, Quail Forever, and we're here to help you.
Yeah, so I guess my main thing is I'd love to see more PBAs all over the US. I think it's kind of a model that's really functional and also is kind of in its biggest growth phase right now. There's PBAs popping up everywhere. So, you know, like Wes said, like get with, you know, your local Quail Forever biologist or your local state biologist and gauge some interest in some counties. And I would love to see a lot more of these PBAs popping up. And I mean, the landowners are who are going to have to do it. Like they're going to get help from agencies, but we need you guys to like take the reins on getting them started. So
I can't really do anything but echo what they've just hit on. We have professionals out there that want to work with landowners, work with other agencies, work with groups to get more fire on the ground. And I'll leave it at that because Jonathan was pointing and I thought he was telling me to tell y'all to call him, but he was telling me there was 1 minute left. So
Okay.
we can leave it at that.
Let's give our panel some applause. And also be sure to text Jonathan at midnight and tell him how much you like this.
Give us just a second to reset here. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Bubba, for that. Thank you for the members of the panel. That was an interesting discussion. I'm sure there's a whole lot more talk that could go on after this meeting is over about prescribed fire. The next gentleman that's going to introduce the Saline River Watershed Alliance is a true champion for aquatic resources in the state of Arkansas. He's a stream habitat coordinator in the west central part of the state. And it brings me projects all the time, calls me very frequently about potential projects and how we can help private landowners out there. I'd like to introduce Matthew Urban.
Thank you for that introduction, Jonathan. I'm really here to introduce. What was that? Mr. Nalley is who I would like to introduce. He was born in Benton, Arkansas. He resides in Saline County. His wife of 42 years, Brenda, we were kind of hoping she could be here with us today, but she was unable to attend. Mr. Nalley has 2 sons and 3 grandkids, high school and trade school education. He started his own business when he was 21 years old and sold that here back in 2016. He's currently retired, but he's an outdoor land manager and conservationist. His love for the outdoors and his outdoor skills came from his father and from the Boy Scouts. Mr. Nalley is an accomplished Eagle Scout and God-fearing man. He's an excellent steward of resources on his property, and he's the founder of the Saline Watershed Alliance. It didn't come from me as a state employee or TNC or any other nonprofit. It was his idea. So it's a grassroots from a private landowner in our community. I'd like for him to talk about the Saline River Watershed Alliance. And we've also got a 8-minute video here of a project that he did on his property.
The Alum Fork. The Alum Fork of the Saline River, 8 miles west of Benton. This was the site of an actively eroding stream bank until Brian Nalley took matters into his own hands. He owned neighboring property and wanted to improve the land and water in the area.
I noticed that the riverbank was eroding, and I just asked them if they'd be willing to sell that property on this side of the river, because I thought I could probably do something with it if I owned it.
Mr. Nalley has a personality that draws people and the good out of people. He's an unbelievable conservationist, wonderful to work with, made my job a piece of cake and look forward to going to work every day. Very enjoyable just because of his ethics, his stewardship, and he cares for the land.
We floated this river a lot as a kid. I skipped my high school senior prom for a float trip on the river that night, so we stayed a lot of time on the river. I always wanted to have a place on the river, and I contacted the stream team about giving me some options. You know, I'm just an amateur at this sort of thing, and the people at stream team are really good at what they do. They helped me work through getting the grants, and it takes a long time to do that.
This project took a lot of partners to make it happen. We were involved with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, their partners for Fish and Wildlife Program, the Southeast Aquatics Resource Partnership, or SARP, and also because we found endangered species in this river, we got a Section 6 grant. And Mr. Nalley spent a lot of his own cash and in-kind services, spent a lot of his own money and time to fix this erosion issue on the river.
To stabilize the stream bank, the stream team developed a plan that included the construction of 8 rock veins that are 80 feet long. They started building the structures on October 7th, 2019.
So this is something that works well for Arkansas and our flashy rainwater systems. This river can jump 10, 15 feet with a good heavy rain. These rock veins point upstream, and what that does is the vein arm itself, when the water hits it, it redirects the flow at 90 degrees back to the center of the stream channel. So your fast water's right off of that tip of the vein, and you create calm water up against the eroding stream bank. If you have calm water, the sediment drops out. Keeping the sediment out of the water cleans the water, clears the water. For sight feeding fish, benefits freshwater mussels, smallmouth bass, long-ear sunfish. There's walleye in this river. There's spotted bass in this river. And so if we can keep the water clean and cool, we're going to benefit those species of fish.
The stream team also planted native trees, shrubs, and grasses to reestablish healthy streamside habitat.
The roots from the trees and shrubs hold the soil together to prevent erosion. Also, as those trees grow, at some point in time, it may take, 20 or 30 years, but they'll provide shade for the water to cool it for smallmouth bass and other aquatic wildlife.
There wasn't any question in my mind was, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Or is this ever going to work? Once they got started, it didn't take much time at all. Matthews, to watch him work this project was a good hands-on experience for me, because he did it kind of how I would do it. He's out here every day and watched him, and he'd crawl out on them rocks and point out exactly where he wanted each rock. So it was a pretty fulfilling process, and it was really amazing, really, once they got started, how quick it went.
This project, meeting Mr. Nalley, a great conservationist, is extremely rewarding. There's a lot of aspects of our job that aren't our favorite. When I'm out here working with property owners and doing the actual construction, after the rock work is complete, planting the native trees and shrubs, and then listening to the benefits right now of the birds singing, the fish jumping in the water, that's the rewarding thing about this job.
Make sure I don't fall down getting up here. Jonathan asked me to do this. And I said, what are we supposed to talk about, Jonathan? He said, well, just tell your story. So I'll tell you the story. I left a while ago to go get my notes. And as I walked by that table over there, I thought about that song that Paul Simon wrote, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And in that song, it says, I'm going to slip out the back, Jack. But I feel very fortunate to be here. These folks from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Arkansas Game and Fish, they were invaluable in that project. Quick couple words, they mentioned my raising, and I was raised in church in a good, strong family background. My father, he was a fix it for yourself or don't fix it at all kind of guy. So we learned at early age that you just do with what you got, fix what you can and live with the rest of it. My mother, she was financially the manager of the house, and she was pretty analytical, but she was also pragmatic. And when we was kids, we were raised outdoors. I can remember getting my shotgun in the 4th grade, and I had an uncle and a couple of cousins. We'd load up. He had a 4-door Studebaker station wagon, and there was 4 of us boys and 2 squirrel dogs and my uncle and my dad in that station wagon, and we'd head off to the woods and spend time squirrel hunting as a kid. Since this project's come about, there's been pretty strong interest for me to help conserve the Saline River. Like I mentioned, I was raised there, spent a lot of time there as a kid, and I've heard a lot of good words this weekend about, or this week about conservation, partnerships. Heard some words about you know, getting things done. And as I thought about all that, two words came to mind, and it's kind of the topic of my subject today is optimism and conservation. Optimism and pessimism are the opposites of each other. And think about, Jonathan told me to tell the story, so here it is. I think about the story of parents. How many of you folks have kids? All kids that you know of. Well, are your kids just alike, or are they different in any way? Anybody have any kids that are just alike? So they're all pretty much different, right? So I think about these two boys these parents had, two twin boys that looked just alike, but they acted quite a bit different. One of the sons was extremely optimistic. Everything that happened, he was just tickled to death. Didn't matter what it was. He'd stub his toe and he'd find a good reason to be happy. But the other son was extremely pessimistic, and everything that happened with this young boy, they just couldn't get over how pessimistic he was over everything. So they got concerned about it. It was getting about Christmas time, and they took these two boys to the psychiatrist. And they asked the psychiatrist, well, do you have any suggestions or any ideas that would kind of help my pessimistic son and maybe my optimistic son a little bit? So guy, he sat back and he thought a minute, and he said, I got a plan for this. So he said, here's what you do. Christmas is coming up. See, your pessimistic son, get him to write down everything that he ever wanted, and you get that for him. And the other son, just get a big box and fill it full of horse manure. He said, I don't know about that. He said, you need to try it. So that's what the parents did. And right after Christmas, the psychologist was going to go by their house, check it out. So he drives up the driveway, and this one boy sitting on the front porch, and there's wrapping paper and boxes and instructions everywhere. And they asked him, he said, well, son, how was your Christmas? He said, oh, it was the worst Christmas ever. He said, I got all this stuff, and I don't know how to use any of it. Half of it don't work, don't have batteries. He said, where's your brother at? He said, he's out in the backyard. He's just out there walking around. So he goes out in the backyard, and they said, well, son, how was your Christmas? He said, well, it was the best ever. He said, all I got to do is find my pony. So that's how we need to look at things sometimes. We just need to find that pony. We talked a little bit about the Saline River. The Saline River, I wrote a couple of notes. Now, I'm not a PhD in anything, so I'm just a guy, just a landowner. But what's interesting about the Saline River, I was talking to a fellow back there a while ago, it's one of the only rivers that's never been dammed. It's free flowing, and it's a goal for Saline County residents to try to keep it that way. About 30 years ago, there was a push to dam up a fort, and it got defeated because of the endangered species and wildlife that were in the river. The Saline River is compromises of 4 forks that start in the kind of southern area of the Ouachita Mountains. It's the Allen Fork, the North Fork, and then there's a middle fork and a south fork. All 4 of those forks converge about 6 miles west of Benton and form the actual Saline River. There's a documentary on YouTube. I think it's Cleveland County or Cleveland County Historic Society put a documentary about the Saline River. It's very informative and educational about the total history from the starting basin to where it runs into the Ouachita River there about Camden. There's several Civil War struggles that went along that river too. So there's a lot of historical context, and I didn't know till I watched that documentary, but there was actually shipping and commerce that went up and down that river. This project that we did here was made possible only by that words of partnership and cooperation. As a landowner, I didn't know how these things worked. I call them the alphabet people. Everybody knows their own acronym, but as a landowner, it gets pretty confusing. So that's kind of a buzzword at the Saline Watershed Alliance, is we're the liaison between landowners and the alphabet people. we try to connect needs of landowners with the people that have the expertise and contacts to do that. The private land biologist, I worked with Wes and some of the other guys at the property that I own. We do quail restoration. We've got some native grass plantings. We've done timber stand improvements, and my wife gets on me about this pyromania. We burn all the time, and she gets on me about being gone burning. But the construction and management of the project, once it's a process. It's not a quick thing when you get ready to do a project like this. There's permits that have to be filed, but the navigation was made easy by the expertise of Matthew and his group, and filling out the permits and getting them sent off for. We took estimates, and the pragmatic side of me and the analytical side of me took several viewpoints. I took there were two other agencies. There weren't agencies, I guess you call them, what's the non-government office, NGOs. They looked at a project, and so I had 3 separate opinions as to how to resolve the same problem. And so I sat down, and the analytical side of me did research, and I thought, and the most pragmatic solution was the one that we worked on. And there's not been any maintenance done on that since that was done. This will be I guess the 3rd winter, and there's not another tree that's fell in the river since this has been done. So, and the banks have been stable. The vegetation is starting to grow between the veins. The river has flooded several times, and it's topped the whole project by 5 or 6 feet. But as the water comes up, the project still manages to keep the bank stable. So that's it's a salute to the expertise and the planning that went into that. Mentioned the Saline Watershed Alliance. In 2020, I got a group of guys together. One of them is Michael Sacamani. He runs a canoe rental on the Saline River. And the other one is Rick Bellinger. He has a business along the river. And we got together and started some meetings to form a nonprofit corporation, Arkansas, and then a 501c3, so that we could engage in property owners to help them understand the process and guide them through the process of restoration projects. And it was a very inspiring speech by the little lady right over there that had the one up in what was it, Montana. I got her number in my pocket, and we're going to be talking about some organizational structure that I keyed in on. At this point, what we're doing is working with a couple of government agencies. We have a 319 grant that we've applied for and gotten. We're not the writer of the grant, but we're in partnership. Our connection in that grant is for stakeholder meetings, where we're going to gather stakeholders and run through the processes that are going on for the study. We're going to do a study on the river to prioritize restoration projects. Another thing that's on the top of the list with the Saline Watershed Alliance is the urban growth. It's necessary. It's coming. The attraction to the Saline County area, just outside of Little Rock, is pretty great. Residential construction is extremely busy right now. I was mentioning to another fellow that west of Benton, where this basin primarily is, it is prime real estate development property. The timber companies have owned it for years, and they're selling it off in larger tracts. Developers are buying it and then breaking it up in smaller tracts. And that all as it is, we're not anti-development, but what we're trying to do is to maintain a healthy structured growth so that it doesn't imperil the river any more than what it already is. And so from that viewpoint, what we're doing is working with the Saline County Planning Board. Saline County has a good county judge, and the new judge that's coming in, he's very aware and very interested in conservation measures. Of course, as a judge, he's interested in county administration. It takes money to do that. So we're working with him and the planning board, which approves and denies subdivisions and adds to or takes away restrictions for the developments as to the necessity to protect the environment that we have and the treasure that we have in the Saline River. The Saline River has a couple of endangered species with the Arkansas fat bucket mussels. Those little mussels, I've learned a lot about this stuff since starting all this. Those little mussels are they're like the canary in the coal mine. They're very critical as to the health of the river. Matthew has helped me. We're monitoring water quality there at my farm to try to keep a pulse on turbidity and the oxygen and all those scientific things. One of the things that we're doing too to help the county and the planning board is we're developing a GSI map. Now I'm like I said, I'm not the geek person, so I'm just spitting words out, but they're developing a map that shows the areas where the development is going to take priority as far as conservation measures. The Facebook page, we have a Facebook page. It's at SRWA 2020, and that's the year that we founded it. A friend of mine, we dabble in music, and so we wrote a song and put a music video to it. One of the verses of the song is, "Men have all tried to labor by day and by night to stop your endless free flight." And it's about the Saline River, where for longest ago, the river was always been as it was, and it's our job to keep it that way. Lastly, we have developed a website. I understand that's big in promotion. So we worked with the Benton High School East Lab. That's some students at the high school that do technical work, and they've developed us a website. We've got t-shirts that we've got, so we're trying to establish outreach within the community. We did have a landowners workshop where we invited landowners from everywhere. You remember how many people showed up that day? 50, how many? 350? No, he said 50, but it was a really good turnout. And we had tables with all the alphabet people, and they were connected with the landowners. So, and Rick, the guy at Riverside Grocery, if you ever come down to Saline County and you cross the North Fork of the Saline, turn right around and go back to Rick's place on Friday, you get catfish and all the goings. It's Riverside Grocery. But that's pretty much all I got. Is there any questions and answers that anybody wants to question? Don't get too technical. That's easy enough. I got one last story about two boys, okay? It's not the same two. Two boys, they were raised in a family. They had a very abusive dad. Their dad was abusive. He was an alcoholic. He was not a contributor to society. As those boys grew up, one of them became a very useful contributor to society. He was well known in the community, had a well family. And the other son was not. He was like his dad. He was not a contributor. He was a drunk and couldn't keep a family. And the thing about it is, both of those boys considered their dad as inspiration for how they turned out. There it is. Thank you very much.